Hello. Hi everyone. Hope you are all good. What's this? Our fourth video now?
Oh, or fifth. Well, I'll say fourth
Yeah.
because we got title on one of them.
Yeah. I had to leave halfway through on one. Yeah. So if first time visiting or returning, basically what we're going to be doing is going through a fair chunk of questions that people ask around about tech, websites, social media, SEO, all that fun stuff. So start off, I am Michael of E2E Studios, and I am a web developer here. So I will be looking at websites, and then I'll also be supporting them from SEO parts to how to gain further traction. So that'll be me and my team supporting businesses to hopefully look at growth and development systems to save time and money, basically. And we have Ailey. Ailey, would you introduce yourself, please?
So I'm Ailey. I am the graphics and social media manager. This means that I support the guys in the overall design of your website, overall design of different graphics. Maybe you don't have a brand and you need a brand new brand. Come and talk to us because we'll design it for you. On top of that, we also assist with social media in the form of content creation. Now, that's not the strategy as a whole, that is just purely making the content and scheduling it out for you, following a strategy that you have. What we cover in our little live streams is basically any questions that you may have. And that can be websites, SEO, content creation, and I do have a background in some social media and advertisement, which I'm more than happy to answer some questions on as well. Yes, Chris, it is Unsuitable Skulls, one of my favourite brands that you've introduced me to. So today we will be looking at a whole range of stuff, and again, mostly focusing on websites because we have just some of the most amazing developers, and Mike being one of them.
Oh, me. Okay, yeah.
Yes. So let's start with, how important is it to have a brand on your website?
I think that if I move away from the brand part of the question, I'll let you answer those parts.
Yeah.
But what I would say first of all from a web part is, if you do have a brand, you then have a set color palette, a scheme, a design, a set structure that's going to be followed throughout the site. Now, when we look at building websites, we want to make sure that when people transition from one page to another, it doesn't look like you've gone from a safari into a desert, or a completely different landscape on what's doing, because it puts people off, it confuses people, it makes them look again going, am I on the right site? So having things like brand consistency can really help play a part of making sure that when people are on your website, that there is that kind of trust element to it, but also that they know that where they're navigating is still part of that platform. I don't really get too much involved in the brand part per se. It's not. I'll kind of honor the branding in terms of making sure that the site kind of continues to work with it, but I don't really get too much involved in the brand parts. Ailey, I'll probably let you answer that one more. I think that's more your part than mine.
Yeah, so having a brand is basically vital to any type of business that you're running. You even have Twitch streamers that have their own brand. You've even got YouTubers that'll have their own brand. And there's also the talk of having your own personal brand. So a brand sets you out from your competition, and if your name isn't memorable, maybe they remember the icon. If you build a website without any brand or brand guidelines, you're going to end up with something very basic, and it's going to be boring. It might do what you need it to do, but are you really standing out from your competition? If your competition have a really well focused brand, they know they're sticking to the key points of their brand, the design and the color schemes, fonts are all consistent, then it shows that they're much more higher quality than not having a brand. If you look at things like McDonald's, Nike, all of that, they all have a very recognizable brand. And if Nike without that brand is just another trainer. So you have to consider it in that way, that the brand is your face of the business, because you're going to go to sleep at night, but your website's going to keep ticking over, and you need to be memorable and have some kind of consistency. So I guess in terms of that as well, it kind of follows into our next question is, what do you look for in a website audit? I know in my side of it, I always look for the brand. I look for the consistency of the design, and I also look at how that's going to flow for not just your use, but for your audience's use. Mike tends to look at the more technical side of things.
Yeah. So from a website, so if we were doing a website, firstly, it depends on what kind of audit we're looking to be doing. So we can do a huge host of them. If we are particularly looking at a design audit to make sure it flows and it looks good, then Ailey would look at those elements and making sure that there is that consistency and it's not a mismatch of designs or elements or a bad user flow. If we looked at other parts of an audit, so we would also, if we did a full audit, we would look at all of that stuff. We would look at the design. We'd also start to look at what we classify as technical SEO. So that is really understanding the code. Is it coded the right way? Is Google picking up the right information? Is there slowness because something hasn't been rendered correctly? Is our search engines finding errors which will be affecting your rating? We would be looking at all those different parts and either looking to fix them or at least pull together a guide about what those things might be. We would also look at things like pages. So do the pages have the right amount of content on them? So this is a lot more about what we classify as on-page SEO. So do the websites have the right content? Do you go to a page and it says, I don't know, how to fix a sink, and then the content says get a plumber? Then there's not helpful information, and there's not enough for Google to really crawl that information to pull a fair amount of information about how useful that article is, or that blog post, or that page is. We would look at the content to make sure that it's consistent, to make sure that it's got all the right data sets for you to be able to really shine on what you're trying to sell. We'd also look at pages that may get a lot of traction but aren't converting people into the right direction. So that could be that you've got a page about I don't know, Nike trainers, if we go back to Ailey's, but we're also a plumbing website. Then actually, why the hell have we got an article about Nike trainers? It might be getting loads of traction because people are finding it, but it isn't the right traction because it's not the ideal client. If you are selling trainers, great, perfect. But if you're not, then actually it's pointless to get those users come into your site because they don't have an issue with their plumbing. So we look at all those different parts and pull together a plan about what we would look at doing, whether we need to remove pages from the site, whether we need to add more, whether we need to amend the content of the sites. We then look at sites to see whether they have the right keyword information about what's being used and what's on there. We look at the site structure to make sure it flows the right way. So are you going from the home page? Are you moving to the right parts? Do you have the right call to actions in the right place? I was just doing a brief video before, which will be out on YouTube in the next week or two. And part of that was about when you go on a website, if you have all of your vital information at the bottom of the website, how many people get to the bottom of the website? Because I bet you any money it's not most of them. So if you've got your vital information at the end, you're thinking, oh, they're going to read all of this content and they get to the end for the call to action to carry on. I tell you what, most of the people aren't going to get there. So it's really important to have those call to actions throughout the site, particularly near the top where their first main of focus is going to be. So if you really need to get people to go to a page, have those places to guide them into it, because they're not naturally going to find those places. We would be looking at all of those lovely elements to really start to help the business grow and move into the right direction. But audits are really long.
They're very long, and we don't just look at it from a technical side. We do look at it from a design side. We do look at it from how users are actually using your site and how can we better improve it. So you're not just getting a very basic, your website's not working. You're getting a pretty damn in-depth report of where things are going wrong for you and where things are going right. Because let's be honest, there will be some elements that are quite right, and we wouldn't want to change that. We'd maybe want to enhance it so it develops even more traction for you, but we're not there to completely tear your site apart. No, we're there to find ways to make it work better.
I'd like to say I think we are also there to tear sites apart as well.
Oh, but that sounds scary.
it does, but unfortunately sometimes you need those rebuilds to convert. I was reading something very recently about a website that a site might be doing brilliant today, but tomorrow it might not, because your site constantly needs those updates to make sure it's working. Let alone all those lovely things we spoke about before, about having the right call to actions, about having the right content. Google also reviews loads of other elements as well, things like how does it work on different types of devices. So we would also make sure it's mobile responsive, or it loads on different browsers, or all those fun elements. And then it also looks at actually when was the site updated. So if you might have really, really good blog articles, but it's not been touched or it's not been looked at for 4 years, Google's like, it's probably old news. It's probably useless now. So you need to make sure that you current, and that's not making sure that you recreate that whole blog post, but you might need to go back and adapt it and make adjustments to or update it. If you've had the, top 10 search engines as your option, actually, when did you last update that? Because those options might have changed. If we look back when they started, Ask Jeeves or Yahoo were the large ones, or Lycos, and now, Ask Jeeves and Lycos, I don't even think they're running anymore, and Yahoo is still there, but is nowhere near the same power as things like Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo as examples. So you need to carry on reviewing your content and making sure it's the right way. So, that we spoke about a little bit about the technical SEO. We spoke about the website design. We spoke about the on-page SEO. And unfortunately, we're still not finished.
No.
Because we then look at something called off-site SEO. So it's how people are interacting with your website or about your website externally from your website. So that might be directory services. It might be social media accounts. It might be articles that your company has wrote in externally. It might be other customers referring to you from things like Trustpilot or Google reviews, or all these parts. They form a large part about your SEO. You can imagine that if you went to go and buy some trainers, Ailey, and you got into the high street and there's 4 shops in front of you all selling trainers, right? Brand might be one of those parts that tickle your fancy, which is always great. So, make sure people tick that box. But if your best friend said to you, actually, the 3rd shop on the left is the best shop, you'll be more guided to go to that shop because you've got a referral, you've got someone that's really honoring that. That's pretty much how Google works. So Google wants to make sure that when you're searching for something, you're getting the right content. Okay? Now, the way it does that is it looks at a few factors. Firstly, does the site work? Is it going to load fast enough for you? Is it localized? If you're looking for a shoe shop, then you don't need one in Australia because you're not going to get there. So it looks at those parts. And then it also looks at, actually, if we have 50, 60, 70, 100 websites all talking about this shoe shop, then actually it must be doing something well because people are talking about it in a positive light. But it is also looking at tone of voice as well, and that's where things like artificial intelligence start to come into play with some of these parts now. But yeah, there's so many caveats to audits. Now, what we would generally do is do one really large audit for a website or a company to get a baseline of what we're working with. We never just go in and say, right, we're going to start adding pages, because not everything's fit for purpose. It might work really well for one company, but it doesn't mean it's going to work well for another. So we have to go back to the start and do a full audit sweep and see what's going on. There's huge amounts of tools out there to do audits. Unfortunately, some of them employ quite a lot of scare tactics to or add content that says it's an error, but it's not been an error since 2012. And no one really cares about it because they don't update their system. So be careful if you use these online services, because you have to kind of.
Yeah, you recently had a 60-page audit on something.
Yeah, so a client sent us over a 60-page audit from an external company, or not an external company, an external automated rendered system. So it wasn't another company that went through it. They've put their URL in and it's generated them a report. But 60 pages of this report, and I was going through it, and a lot of it was absolute garbage. Because they're an automated system, they're not using the site really. I mean, I know when Chris does work for us, when he's doing the SEO stuff as well, we really make sure that we're going through in depth about what's actually being done on that website and how people are using it, because an online system isn't going to pull the exact same information as a user might. And then we kind of move on to some of the analytics that we utilize. And we'll probably touch on that in another episode. I'm about to put some links onto YouTube, or Ailey's going to do some edits for those, to put some on there about some of those. But we'll probably do a session on those as well at one point, where people can actually see what's going on with these analytics and what they can do for their systems.
We do have a data and insights video on YouTube. It's a shorter version of what Mike's releasing, and it does focus more on the social medias, so you can have a little look at that. It also tells you a bit about your audience and stuff, and it gives you a really good footing to just get you started. So our next question that we have is, so it's kind of similar, but the way I want to look at this is from if it's a fresh build, they don't have a website before. So what is your process for finding out what a website needs?
So from a fresh website perspective, first time website.
Yes, first time, they've got no experience, they just know they need a website.
Okay. I don't generally go in and just build a website because they say that they might need one. Usually I would have either a Zoom call, or I'd go meet them in person to run through it in more detail and find out actually what the requirements for the website are, because it might be that they actually don't need a website and they don't need our services. And I don't want to try and sell an item to someone that it isn't needed. So that would be probably the first part. I mean, you can imagine if a singular taxi driver that sits in his black cab and can't really use his phone, and he says, I need a website for people to contact me, it's probably not the right port of call for this one. If he was using it as a combined route for multiple taxi drivers, then maybe that's a different option if we think of things like Uber-esque type systems. But you need to make sure it's fit for purpose for that person to utilize it. I would say that's probably one of the first parts I would go through. Then I'd go through more about their requirements. Now, we have a difference here. So in E2E Studios, we specifically look at more systems compared to websites. So we do work on websites, but we look at more of a system thinking version of those sites as well. So if I was sat with a person, I need to understand firstly what they need out of their website. Is it that they just want a basic website that says, this is what I do, these are my services, click here to get in contact? That's not too dissimilar from our own website, because we don't have functionality on our website. It's more about the services that we offer, whether that's web development or social media, or it's graphic design or SEO or whatever. So that's just really a standard services system. If it needs to do something functional, that's a very different story. So if it needs a sales system, if it needs a login system, if it needs a place to automatically generate invoices or whatever it looks like, we'd go through that in more detail about actually what kind of users are using the system. Are they desktop? Are they mobile? Because if you know the site is purely for desktop users, we'll probably look at it in a different light. And it does happen because we've got certain systems where like an administrational area probably isn't as fit for purpose as it would be on desktop, because you can't type as much on a mobile easily, and people want it and they're usually at a desk or they're in a workplace environment when they're utilizing it as well. So we'd look at those parts from a website needs, and then really go into detail. And we generally, I would then spend some time with Ailey or whomever to start looking at a design for a site, how we're going to start looking at laying it out, how it's going to work from a user flow perspective, about working it from there. I mean, I guess the benefit from when we start doing a website for the first time is we've already got things like SEO in mind. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to make the website ready for SEO. It's ready for first on Google, because that's a long journey over time where you have to generate all those things over a lengthy period of time.
Yeah.
But what we do is set it in the right precedent to be comfortable for SEO to start with, and then easy to adapt onto for future reference to keep it growing. And that's pretty much our process for websites. It's a lot about the discovery pieces. It's a lot about going back to the people and making sure we've got the right information for what they need to do next, and then engaging with them about going through back and forth, saying this is what we've done so far. Does it work? And testing becomes probably one of our largest parts of our systems as well, particularly when we've got something that we know is going to get high customer focus. Then we need to ensure that it's running operationally correct as soon as it goes live. So that's probably. And I
will say that we don't just consider building a website that works here and now. We consider future use of it as well. So if you've got a website and maybe later on down the line, maybe a year or 2 years down the line, you decide you wanted to do a bit more, we take that into consideration when we're building it, so that there is a bit of flexibility for you to make additions to it as well.
Yes,
So
yeah, exactly.
Because at the end of the day, your business is going to grow, your services are going to grow, and you're going to want that website to scale up with you. So that kind of follows into this next question, and it is, how long does it take to make a website? Now, this is asked near enough every time we've done a quote, which is it's an acceptable question to ask. It's also asked a lot online, and I see a lot of people asking about it on Facebook groups and the likes. And we're gonna have to use the horrible phrase that's used pretty much everywhere, is it depends.
Yeah, I was just about to say, so I feel like you're right. This is a question that pretty much every client wants to know, because they want to know when their service is going to be ready. And I imagine out of everything that happens for a web development or software or anything else, it is probably the question that developers or designers probably hate the most, because it is extremely hard to quantify a time before we fully get working on something, particularly something that we've not worked on before. If something extremely niche and segregated, then things can generally take often up to years to perfect and get right. And it really does depend on what is being done. Now, if we break it down to a few different elements, so if someone was looking for a one-page website with a landing page and a bit of a call to action, we'd probably say maybe 2 to 3 weeks would be fairly generous within that period of time. The first week looking at kind of the design, the layout, and getting sign off from a client, and then the following period is going through, making sure it works, testing it, and then finally moving it into a live environment. So a few weeks really for those kind of parts is fairly okay. I mean, to use the same word again, it can depend, because what we also need to do is ensure that those 3 weeks aren't purely on us as developers or designers to make sure that's been done right. We also need the engagement from the client as well. So if we smash it out of the park in the first week, we've got all the design ready, we've pinged it over to the client, and they don't respond for us for a week and a half, then there's not a chance we can get the rest of it done in 3 days' time. So I think just setting out the right expectations and goals for everyone from the start is definitely the right approach. After that, I think we start looking at probably slightly bigger pages where you might have a few different parts about blog posts and services and about pages. Probably talking there maybe around about the month, just over the month marker, to try and get them up. Now, generally can be done faster in terms of actual time, but we're talking about juggling our other clients at the same time, as well as giving it enough time to send it back to clients to have adequate time to review those changes before we just push something live. We start looking at then more advanced systems, and this is where it really does highly depend on what is being worked on. Now, we've still been working on a system now for just over 2 years, which still isn't finished. It has been live for quite some time, but there's constantly updates to it about what needs to be added as functionality, because it is a long project that needs to be worked on, and the testing part of that is quite highly required. Now, we've probably seen, if anyone was here for the intro video, we had a guy swearing with a spin wheel. That's one of our clients who does game streaming on Twitch. Now, we've been working with a system for him for just shy of 2 years now. We've been working on his platform, and that one does take a lot of development time. So as an example, Quinn streams 7 days a week, about 8 hours a day, sometimes longer, but generally he'll always stream every day. And that means when we're doing our testing, we have to test something, but really it kind of gets more tested in the live environment, which is quite hard when we've got literally about 17,000 people that are about to see it. So we need to make sure that it gets right, because if we don't, then it also affects the streamer, his income stream, his credibility, although that's questionable at best for Quinn. But all those things need to be taken into account when we look at these different types of systems. And his takes quite a long time because it probably takes about 3 to 4 weeks just in a test environment before we even think about putting it live. Then we'd have to have a sit down with the streamer, with his moderators, run through it first, make sure they're all comfortable with it before we say, right, are we happy? Monday, we put it live, you can test it on the stream. And then we have to then be available during that time when it goes live to make sure that if something goes wrong, we're at hand to fix it in the live environment. So, you know, there's loads of those things that get taken into a place when we look at developments. So yeah, how long does it take is pretty hard to navigate. But yeah, still ask the question, even if we don't like it. And you know, we try and give a close baseline of what we feel is possible based on the other juggling factors that we have on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and a thing to consider is if you're doing a long build, there is going to be some data changes. There's going to be some kind of regulation change that you will have to adapt to, and that sometimes adds maybe a couple of weeks, sometimes it can be a month, depending on what these changes are. And often these changes are completely out with your control. It's done by completely separate organizations, even sometimes the government. So you have to also take that into consideration if you want to do a really big, complex system. There will be points where policies and laws will change and you have to adapt to it.
Yep.
I would say if you've gone to a developer and they're like, I'll get it done in 7 days, I would be a bit wary, because usually in my experience and from experience from our clients, those are developers that have used templates and all they've done is change a logo and a bit of content, and it's a copy and paste job for a lot of them. Some are actually that quick and it's quite amazing to see it done, but just, you know, ask the question, make sure that it's a realistic time frame. If you've got a build that's going to take a year and they go, oh, it's going to be about 6 months, then I'd be like, okay, but is it actually being tested properly? You know, you've got to have the realization and the expectation that big builds are not done quickly, because these big builds need to be done in the right way, and they need to be secure, and they need to work and be constantly tested. And the reason that I say that is because we don't want any of our clients ending up in some bad reputation or bad footing because something's gone wrong in the test phase. You know, that's why we have these test phases. We knock out the bugs, we knock out the problems at an early stage before it goes live.
Yep.
So I guess this also comes into it is, will I be able to update my own website, and how do I do it?
It depends.
Again, the most used phrase in marketing, developers, and graphics is always "it depends," because everything that I know that E2E Studios do is completely and utterly tailored to the individual and the business and user needs. So
yeah. We generally make a lot of our websites custom built. So generally completely from the ground up, we'll build the relevant areas to what they need. Often or sometimes we will utilize other services if it's more from a requirement from the client, or it feels it's the best approach, because we know from the start that the client wants to be able to update pretty much all of it. They just want the original part being updated. So it depends on what their skill sets are as well. Now, if they have got minds to take in a real web developer, then we can go all out and build a full-fledged custom system, and then we can do a handover for their next developer. If they haven't got an in-house developer and they still want to be able to make changes, that's the start place where we start to look at other systems like WordPress, where they still own the site, but they can make some fairly easily modifiable parts, whether that's updating pages, uploading images, or whatever else. So, you know, for those ones, we would give them the ability to update their own website, and the way they would do that is just use the standardized CMS. With our own custom sites, so that one does become different. So we have been perfecting the way we've been working on sites to allow more flexibility for our end users or for our clients to be able to utilize their system. But that doesn't mean everything in a system is available to be edited from a user perspective. Now, if you imagine utilizing things like Facebook, So I can create my group or my page on Facebook, but that doesn't give me carte blanche to do anything on Facebook within that page. There is restrictions in place, and that's the same when we make our custom systems, because we put rules and regulations in place to make sure that things flow the consistent way. Okay. Or that they're having the right actions or the right requirements post when you finished. So some elements we will create where they have to be coded to be amended because it has a functionality-based requirement. Other times we can build an area where it's not, it allows some flexibility for updates. So if you want to be able to update pages like privacy policy and terms and conditions, then we can make that as an option where you can make those changes. Same, you'll also want to be able to add in things like new categories or new products or new parts like this. We would create all those elements where you can make those parts, or the same with blog posts or update your contact details. We'll build all that in a way that you can make those modifications, but it won't give you carte blanche to make every change to it unless you brought someone in to look at the code part of it or contacted us. If we are aware from the initial discovery that a specific part needs to be editable, we will build it in a way that is editable. It really depends on that discovery piece, on what flexibility that you want as a user. But do remember that because it's custom, we have to code all of it, which means the more functionality you have, then the more it costs. However, if you know you're going to be updating that a lot, actually it probably saves you more money in the long run and time than having to come back to a developer to make adjustments. So really do think about what you need to use the website for, and what it's there before you engage with either us or any form of developer. Be very, very clear with the requirements, because having the facility to see something and edit something is huge amounts of time difference and build differences. So really be clear with whoever you're engaging with to make sure it's being done the right way.
Yeah, and there's always going to be elements in a custom build that you just cannot edit, because some of it is actually built structure-wise for SEO and for future growth. And if you want to go and play with that, it's likely that something's going to break along the lines and it's going to render your site useless. So we have to take that into consideration as well, that there will be elements you cannot touch. Some of it's security-wise, some of it is SEO, some of it's technical. There's lots more that goes on into a website that is often unspoken about and unseen, and that's one of the reasons why we started our lives, is so that we can just be really honest and be like, look, there is going to be things that can't be touched, and there is things that we can do. There is elements as well that are actually you should not do at all, and having messy code is probably one of Mike's worst nightmares.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, I think everyone has the elements of. I look at code that I did like 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, what was I thinking? And because the difference with tech is you are always advancing that field and learning more. And every time you advance it, it's hard to then look back at what you used to be able to do. We've got a new guy in the office that we're training with web development, and we were showing him some of the elements, and it became pretty clear that it was quite hard to teach him, because actually we haven't taught him the fundamentals, because we started with all the fundamentals and then we've moved into the more advanced stuff. But you can't just push someone into the deep end of the advanced stuff without giving them the fundamentals. We had to reverse a little bit of that, internally, how we're working it. But yeah, I think that's quite a good part about tech, and particularly if you engage with a development company that is continuously trying to improve, they are always attempting to get to. We probably don't go to the forefront of technology. We're pretty close, but we stay at a comfortable level where we're not in the pure testing environment. So we're not putting stuff in there that might not be working in 6 months' time. We're kind of just before that, so we're more of the more built and structured stuff, and we're moving forward with that part.
And in terms of like how do you update your website? Again, if you're on a platform like WordPress, there's tons of YouTube tutorials that you can find that'll teach you how to do posts, teach you how to update certain sections. If it's a custom build and it's custom from us, we do go through everything with you at the end of the build to go, look, this is how you can change this bit. If you click here, you can change the text by doing this. Because we don't believe in just handing it over and leaving you to tread water. We are a team and we are here to support you. if you do make a mistake on a website that we've built, come and talk to us, because we'd rather help you fix it than have you sitting there going, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, and just leaving it.
Yeah, things get missed sometimes in a test environment from something that you might not use. Maybe it's only used once a year, and you just not notice something has gone awry until that. Now, we've worked with other companies in the past, or some of our clients have as well, where they've engaged people where they've got in their contract that if you don't notice an error within 7 days, after that 7-day mark, it'll be a chargeable billable hours. We don't generally work that way. It highly depends on what the error is. So if it's an error that they neglected to, I guess, go into full detail about how they want it to work, so not an error, more like a flow that wasn't consistent with their original approach, then that would most likely look at a billable part. But if it's something that functionality-wise doesn't work but based on what we were paid for, we would look at amending it straight away to get it fixed, because ultimately that's what was paid for. So you wouldn't want a tiler to come in and miss half your tiles, and then he comes back 2 days later and charges you again. Like, we didn't do the tiles the first time. So that's the way we kind of have our approach with web development.
Yeah, and again, we do white label as well for agencies, freelancers, all of that kind of stuff, because we know how hard it is to find a developer that knows what they're doing. And even then, we have developers that don't design, so I'll step in and do the design element for them. So it's because we also white label, we also know the structure that needs to be in place, and we also know that the quality needs to be consistent on all bases. I'm very much driven by the customer service side of things. I've had experiences in agencies, experiences in worldwide brands where the service is just not to a standard, and you don't see that retention of customers. Whereas I drive so much of the customer service to people, and I'm pretty sure I get on the guy's case quite a lot when things come through, and I'm like, why is it not done? Why haven't we spoke to this person in so long? Why is this? So the next question that we have, and we shall continue, is...
Well, oddly enough, the next question we have is, why do you guys talk funny from YouTube? Which is an interesting. I don't know if we talk funny. We've got Ailey, who's from Scotland.
I'm Scotland.
So I have an accent, and I'm from Manchester, so I'll have more of a Mancunian accent. I don't know. It depends where you're from, Frank.
Yeah.
All the accents.
Yep. Depends where you're from. I mean, I could go to Glasgow, which is a quick drive down the road for me, and the accent will be completely different. It's the same if I go down to the village that's literally next to my village. The accent's completely different as well. Okay, so our next question is, what is hosting, and do you provide it?
Okay. Hosting is... So what happens when you create a website is it needs to be stored somewhere to stay online and to be accessible. Hosting is basically that. It's putting all the files onto a server or a place where it can be accessed through the World Wide Web. So we do offer hosting. We offer it in a range of different guises, whether it's a more unique hosting plan or whether we put it on like shared servers or however else is needed for that type of website. So we do offer hosting, and that is from image hosting to video hosting to web hosting to all those fun little different elements of hosting platforms. The main part that we look at from a hosting perspective is to make sure it's fit for purpose. Sometimes we have to put things in certain regions. So as we were talking about earlier on with our streamer Quinn, we have to put his close to him geographically, because when he connects to like London-based servers, it's too slow to render in real time while he's streaming. So his is over in San Francisco. Yeah, I got it right. His is over in San Francisco, but it looks like they are starting to make some closer ones in like Auckland and stuff, which we may be moving to in the future to make sure it's the most optimized for him and his users. Similar, we have clients over in places like Spain, so we want to make sure that the wherever their main user base is that's looking at it, it's closest to them. Or then we may have to look at, if you start looking at worldwide services, Amazon or Microsoft, they'll have multiple data centers close to their main users, so they can make sure that it's faster and approachable for each of those different types of locations. So we look at all those different caveats from a hosting perspective to make sure it operationally continues to run, and we add other things like SSL or secure certificates. I think we mentioned that in probably one of our previous videos.
Yeah, I think it was one of our first ones that we covered that in.
So we connect to all that stuff, and the way we provide it is just sit with the client and find out actually what are their requirements, whether they need to have more hard drive space because they are storing video files or audio files, whether they need more RAM intense systems because they have a lot of churning data that needs to be run through, or operational parts that need to be worked on. So we work with the client to make sure that it's the right way of hosting. I would definitely be wary of cheaper hosting. I know it's used quite a lot with a lot of other companies, particularly things like GoDaddy or other elements like that, where they offer hosting for as little as like £1 a month or whatever. But generally there'll be a lot of add-ons, kind of like Ryanair. When you want to travel, they'll charge you like £4 for the flight, but then you'll need a little bit more.
Do you want a chair? That's an extra cost.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to pay a little bit more for the storage, a little bit more for an SSL, a little bit more for email systems, a little bit more for another domain or referring stuff. And all those things end up being bolting up, and it actually is more expensive than moving somewhere else that seemed more expensive in the other part. Or they'll do it as an offer for the first year, where they'll give you a domain for 99p for the first year. But actually, subsequently, it'll be like £24. Whereas if we went somewhere else, it might have been £7 a year, which inherently would save funds on. So do look around for hosting.
Yeah, and don't go thinking you don't need hosting, because if you don't have hosting, you don't have a website.
Yeah, you always need hosting, and it needs to be paid for to stay online. And those prices vary whether you want to do self-hosting, which we do support some of our clients with, where we'll give them their own hosting platform, but then they have to manage it, and that's the important part. They would have to manage that if there needs to be modifications, whereas if we were doing it, we would manage the hosting ourselves because it's internal. So, and those are the differences.
And we've got a thanks for the answer from Frank. Just as an American, it sounds a bit strange. I would say that if we were to reverse that, Americans sound a bit strange to us. And I'm sure all the different countries, it all sounds different and strange to each other.
Cheers, Frank, for connecting in anyway.
Thank you. And, if you've got any more questions, please ask.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions regarding tech, websites, SEO, social media, whatever, just ask away, and we'll happily answer it for the next 20 minutes or so, or next Thursday.
20 minutes or so. Or if you flood us with questions, we'll just keep answering. So the next one is one that you asked to put in, is what are APIs? So APIs, I think, get a lot of confusion. As a designer, I'm not a technical person, and I didn't know about APIs until I started with you guys. So let's go into it.
So API, I mean, if you want to go into what it stands for, so Application Programming Interface, API. An API is really a connection point. Okay, so many pieces of software now use API endpoints to connect to different data and utilize information. Now, so we get asked a lot about, like, can we just connect the API? Now, every single API is different because it outputs a different type of data. So whether we connect to Facebook API or Twitter API or Instagram's API, even though that's Facebook, they are different because they'll come back with different metrics. The way you can kind of picture an API is it's kind of like you just asking someone for information. So you ask them for information, and they'll return the information back to you. That's really what an API is. Or you could send information to an API, and then that'll do some different parts, and it'll give you a response back. Yeah. Or it might not even give you a response back.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of social media schedulers use API.
Yeah.
And if you see it disconnecting, if there's issues with your scheduler, it's not actually the scheduling platforms issue. It is usually the social platforms issue. I know just now that since September, there has been a major issue with the API for Facebook groups and posting to these groups. So if you're experiencing errors of posting from your scheduling platform to a group, then you're going to be in an absolute nightmare, because unfortunately it's Facebook's issue and these platform developers can't do anything to fix it. So we have another brilliant question from Frank. Thank you for asking it. Do you have any advice as to creating a link that I could easily share a 9 gigabyte file streaming video?
9 gig file is a very, very large video file. The first thing I would probably look at doing is compressing it if you can. We use some software called Handbrake. I think their website is handbrake.fr. And it's an open source video. I think it's open source, so it's free at least anyway.
There's also TinyWell that I tend to use for PDFs. It does have a video compression as well.
Yeah, you probably want to look at optimizing. So if you do want to upload it to a different platform, I mean, you should be able to upload a 9 gig file to places like Vimeo. And they also allow you to create private URLs if you didn't want other people to find it. I'd try and see if you can compress it first, because 9 gigs is a really large file for someone to try and download. I mean, if you think of a film, they're probably a decent HD film, probably looking about the 3 gig marker. So yeah, I would probably look at compressing it, or maybe bringing it down into bite-sized chunks if you wanted to do it that way. Sharing it, if you wanted someone to watch it online, then you'd probably have to do something like Vimeo. If you wanted to just send it a person, we usually use something like WeTransfer to transfer large files, something like that, if you want to move it elsewhere. Yeah,
you've also got things like Dropbox and Google Drive. But a 9 gigabyte file, it's still coming back to this, it's huge. There is ways to compress it. I know Adobe do like an encoder, which can help compress videos as well. But I think ultimately your first goal would be to get that file size down, and then you're finding a platform that you can share it on, be it Dropbox or Google Drive. You can also do private or password protected videos on YouTube. So if you're sending it to someone, send them the link to this password protected video and give them the password to access it.
Yeah. We kind of got derailed from our API.
Yes,
talk.
our API talk.
Chris is pretty much right from what he said. It's a set of keys and a map to an extent. But there's loads of different parts. So Ayla was talking about social media stuff. So the way it works is each part of a party of both people connecting needs to have something in place for code. You can't just say, I want to connect to this website via an API. They need to have code on their side to interact with it. So the way it works is, let's say we'll use Facebook as an easy example for social media posting. Facebook have created a library of API endpoints. There's different ways to connect to them. Sometimes you need authentication to make sure that you are who you're supposed to be, like login authentication codes. Sometimes they are open APIs where they don't need authentication. You can just ping it at any given time. They have coded them to be very specific about how they interact. So you will be able to ping that API and saying, I want to get all posts for my channel. So you ping them that. They'll then return them with that data set, with that piece of information. But it'll always be the exact same structure until they change it. This is kind of what Ayla is saying before about changes. If they ever change their API endpoint, your code may no longer be compatible. So if you are having to rely on API endpoints as part of your application or your system, you really need to be engaged and have a web developer on standby, or have your own web developer that can make those modifications to the API if and when anything comes up. Some APIs generally don't change for years, other times. So we use Stripe for payment gateways. Theirs seems to change every couple of months because they want to enhance their offerings or add new payment methods in, all those parts. Facebook changes quite a lot because they add new components in. Google's generally don't change too much. Same with Amazon AWS, but there is subtle changes sometimes. It might not be earth-shattering changes. but they will make changes on there as well.
Yeah.
Or even APIs get phased out over time. So because we do a lot of work with Twitch streamers, we're doing stuff with theirs, and they had an API endpoint, which now they've started to phase out, which was their Helix system. So they phased that out, and they're using Event Sub or Kraken API endpoints. So we've had to make sure that over time, we've stopped using Helix and moved it into the new systems APIs and stayed on top of it. Because what you don't want is them to not know that the API is changing, and you only find out when your website stops working.
Yeah. We have another question in. So what we have from YouTube is Cheeky Vinto, one of our Twitch streamers, is what makes E2E Studios stand out?
What makes E2E Studios stand out? Well, I think there's a few parts. One is today. I think there's not a lot of developers that'll just start to talk about everything that they do. I know I've had a few comments saying like, "Oh, you're sharing all your secrets." I'm not sharing secrets. These are things that you can do some research on, and we give support to our clients to make sure that there is relevant information for them to get more information. So, we engage with a lot of our users, and we're pretty close to a lot of our clients over a long period of time. We are generally there for the long haul. We want to build a system that we're also proud of and that we can also shout about, whether that's doing a case study or writing on our portfolio or speaking of it as examples to other clients. We want to make sure that the long-term parts is there. We want to continue to progress E2E Studios for a long period of time. We started to grow our team. Ale on board doing the graphics and the social media elements. We've took on a new person, James, who's looking at junior web development. We've got Chris, who's looking at SEO and some elements of WordPress. We want to continue to grow and support all different people in the guise of what we do. We get involved in a bunch of different subjects and areas, whether it's from looking at game streamers that we spoke about, whether it's looking at mortgage systems, whether it's looking at insurances or search engines or
fitness apps or
fitness apps or storytelling. We get involved with all those different parts, and we want to make sure that we've got the knowledge to support pretty much any client. We're not the experts of any of those fields. We're not the experts. I'm definitely not the expert of a fitness app. I'm not an expert of storytelling. I'm not an expert of Twitch streaming, although I've done it, but that's why I know I'm not an expert. All those different parts that we work on, we have to really work on with our client. It's really imperative that we work with our clients to make sure that what they need has been understood from us, and we work with them to build the system with them from the ground up, and we engage them all the way through that process to make sure it's flowing, it's working correctly. I wouldn't say that is unique to E2E, because it does happen and there is really good developers out there, but that's something that we strive to perfect and keep on top of.
Yeah, and I will say this, the guys are very humble in talking about what they do. Every time I've had one-to-one meetings or talked to people, I'm always talking about how amazing they are, because as someone who's worked with different agencies, I haven't come across developers that are constantly wanting to fix problems. So was it a couple weeks ago you made a plugin because you came across something that you didn't like, so you're like, screw it, I'm going to fix it. So I haven't come across developers with that kind of passion and that dedication to just want to do more. On top of that, the Twitch development side of things is quite unique in the fact that we're not just developing overlays or quick triggers. What we're doing is developing a full system that's tailored to the individual's needs or what they want it to do. For instance, the guys have developed Quinn's toxicity system, and that I'd not seen before for any other streamers. I used to stream as well. I streamed in the very early stages of Twitch, and I have seen it come in leaps and bounds, and I'm still to see other developers do what the guys are doing. On top of that, there's very few developers that will take on board the fact that they can't design. And a lot of developers I've met have believed that they can also design at the same time. Luckily, Mike discovered quite early on that the design is not where his forte is or his skill set is, and I have come on board to assist and make those designs better. having someone who thinks in design and development is two different complete mindsets and two different parts of your brain working. For instance, I'm always drawing, I'm always looking at colors, fonts, I'm looking at trends, all of that kind of stuff. And Mike's like, oh, we'll just use black. And I'm like, no, you can't use black. Or what was it the other day? You're like, oh, we'll put a white bee on a yellow background. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work. So it's two different mindsets that are needed. And if you're wanting basically a well-rounded website, you want someone to do the design and then someone to do the development. So we've got another comment from Frank on our YouTube. It's about his video, and it's like a handmade documentary because there is copywritten music. YouTube detects it, and it's unuploadable there. So again, yes, AI do have a lot of things to detect these copyrights. So maybe look at Vimeo, or maybe look at
a lot of these different platforms will most likely block copyrights. There's so many DMCA takedowns these days that they're pretty hot on those areas. I mean, I think that's the difference. If you've got copyright music, you're gonna have a little bit of a hard time with this.
Yeah.
I think the first thing you probably want to look at doing is reducing the file size, as we've mentioned previously. If you just want to share it with people, I mean, you could try and get access to the copyright material, but it depends on what kind of material you've got in there. You could try and see if you can get rid of the copyright. You could try and purchase access rights to share it. There's options for those, but they're usually quite costly, particularly for something that's homemade. The option is to we don't generally endorse utilizing copyright because it gets into a huge amount of trouble. You could upload it to your own web server, and then that's up to you. If you have a DMCA takedown, then you still need to take it down. There's too many laws and restrictions in place for you to do too much. And if you want to share it with people, probably as long as you don't want to stream it online, a la YouTube, Vimeos, or those parts, you could definitely, as Aileen mentioned, upload something like Google Drive or Dropbox or one of those platforms where you can share it with people and send them a link and they can download it on their own computer and use it there. They're probably your best options. There's not a huge amount of options you've probably got if YouTube's going to take it offline. You could try it on Vimeo, but you may have the same problems in place where their copyright parts strip it out.
But
I
think
you could give it a try. Vimeo, Dailymotion, or wherever. There's loads of these different video streaming platforms.
Yeah, and I would say your main focus right now should really be getting your file size down. If you are struggling with a lot of copyright music, there are tons of websites where you can get music for free, and it will not be flagged as copyright. So it might be worth doing some research into that as well.
Yep.
Cool. So, do we have time for another question, do you think?
Yeah, we'll give it a go. Why not?
Let's see. So you've already kind of covered this, so we'll just go to our very last question, which is, what are backlinks?
What are backlinks?
And they're not actually links on your back, just before anyone thinks that.
Oh, I've got the answer wrong then. No, backlinks, referring domains, citations, whatever you want to call them. We touched this very briefly earlier on when we spoke about website audits. We didn't go into much detail without around backlinks, but a backlink is basically another website with your address sending people to it. So whether that is social media parts or directories or wherever, backlinks can be really important. I mean, they can also hinder if you've got bad backlinks, and we look at those with our clients as well to make sure we can try and reduce negative backlinks out of it and remove them.
I think a common mistake that people have made is going onto sites, for instance, like Fiverr, seeing someone offering a heap of backlinks and going, right, cool, it's cheap, I'll get it. And then it ends up being in like India and China and all these different countries where your business isn't actually focusing on at all, and it actually works against you.
Yeah, we touched on this earlier on about just content and what focus your company is and how it is geographically. Now, if I created a website, and we'll go back to a shoe shop. So if I've created a shoe shop and I want to get referrals, the perfect referrals for you would be other shops that sell similar products. It'll be blogs, review sites, testimonial sites. All those are the key parts about gaining traffic and the right backlinks to yours. If you do go onto services like Fiverr or wherever, and you say, oh, you see a want to buy 10,000 backlinks for £50 or £5 or whatever it is, and you buy it, Ayle's right. You're going to get pointless backlinks, which aren't, so they might look great. You look at your analytics, you go, oh, I've got thousands of backlinks, but they're useless. They're not helping your journey as a business. And and even Google looks at it and goes, what are all this crap? They can also see if a company is putting spam out there, and they will negatively downgrade you for this until you do something about it. So there is ways to tell Google, I don't want those links. I don't endorse those links. There's ways to do that, and that's what you would need to do if you see these companies leeching onto yours. Okay, so those are the parts that you really want to make sure that you're focusing on and not having these negative backlinks coming into your system. You want to really focus on the right backlinks, the right channels that are really empowering your image. Similar to what we spoke about before, if loads of plumbers are all going on, get these kids. I mean, it might work a little bit for types of shoes, like service shoes, but if you're looking for sports trainers, then going on loads of plumbing parts is probably not the right, demographic. So those are the parts that you really want to think about: is, are you getting the backlinks from the right association, and are they doing you a good service or a negative service? But a backlink simply is how many links are sending people to your website.
Yeah, quite simply that. So it's about time that we start wrapping up. If you have any further comments, you are welcome to join us again on Thursday at 11 a.m. every week. We're doing lives, we're answering questions. If you've got a problem such as Frank's had this session, we're happy to give you advice and help. You might think that we're giving away all these secrets, but to be honest, you can Google most of this. It's not the secrets that we're giving you when you work with us, it's the actual experience, the work that we can do to save you from learning that and making sure everything's done correctly. Yep. I mean, there's nothing worse. I've tried to code myself and I managed to somehow break the platform, and I gave up very, very quickly. So there'll be many people that are in the same
situation. Don't worry, she doesn't code our website.
I don't code. I'm banned. I am banned from touching any of the websites that we have. So don't worry about that. I'm just there for the design and all of that kind of pretty stuff. So again, every Thursday at 11, come and join us live. It's on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to follow our page, E2E Studios, if you want to be up to date with everything. And thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time. Is there anything else you would like to say, Mike?
No, I think you've summarized it very well. I'll see you all again next Thursday. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the questions from everyone. Really appreciate it. And as Ayle said, if you have thoughts, more questions, pop along, ask away. More than happy to answer pretty much anything you need, as long as I know it.
Yeah. And if we don't know it, we'll be able to find somewhere to direct you for the right answer. So again, thanks everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye.